Hello everyone, I appreciate it's been a minute since I've posted a video. There's been a lot going on in my life. I just kind of want to give you a bit of an update on what's going on and where we're going with the channel overall. For today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about my experience for the regional qualifier that happened in Las Vegas, which I had the pleasure of playing in. We're also going to be talking about the new bans that were announced and how that's going to impact deck building and basically talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing with the channel going forward. So with that all said and done, let's jump into it. So where have I been? It's been an interesting time. So back in, and this is going to be a bit of a personal overshare, back in September of last year, I was actually diagnosed with ADHD. I started medication around December, and the initial stuff that I was using, the Elvance tablets I was taking, was really helping with my focusing. It was making it very easy to stay concentrating on long tasks such as editing and all of that kind of stuff. The problem with the Elvance is I ended up having to keep track of my health markers, and we ended up in a situation where my resting heart rate was getting very, very high. Normally it's quite good, somewhere around 56, maybe 60, depending on how active I've been. And my heart rate started going up to about, my resting heart rate started going up to about 90. So the doctor said that might cause a untreatable case of death in the long run. So they switched up my medication, and unfortunately, the new stuff that I've currently been taking has been not helpful, and it's made focus very, very difficult. It means things like editing in that has been a huge problem. So there's been a big gap in content in terms of just being able to shoot it is one thing, and then actually editing it together so that you guys can watch it and enjoy it is a different thing. But what I'm going to be trying to do as we move forward is we're going to be going for a little bit more shorter form content. We will still do the big interviews that we've done before, like the podcast episodes, but it's going to be less frequently. I've got a friend who helps me with editing, and those are going to be more special occasions as opposed to being the normal content. So what I want to do is focus on sort of deck building, strategy, and things that are going on, and sort of get back into being consistent with you guys. So with that out of the way and that overshare completely all out there, let's move into where I've been. So I got the chance to play in the regional qualifier in Las Vegas, and I played Lucian. The cool thing with Lucian is that I was effectively looking at what does my deck do better than every other deck in the format. Now, we have Draven. This is before the bans. That was definitely the best holding deck. We had Aurelio that was the best conquering deck. And we also had things like Fiora on the outskirts and Ezreal as well, which basically had the best consistency. So it's like, okay, if I'm not aiming for any of those things, what am I going for? And the answer was the most cheesiest, best scoring deck in the format. And that's where I came up to Lucian. And I was taking a look at the results based from Bologna. And really interestingly, congratulations to Demon X, who was able to win the best of Lucian. My final score, I did make it to day 2 in Vegas. My final result was 8-5, which day 2 went horribly, horribly wrong. I ran into a bunch of Kaisers, and my deck was quite weak into Kaiser. I think I needed more playtesting experience into it, so that was entirely on me. I generally had the same strategy as Demon X, but my deck was a little bit more teched out. His deck was a lot more focused on, here's the thing that I'm trying to do, and that's the direction I should have went in overall. If I could replay the tournament now, I think I would have had the better result. I think I could have potentially been closer to 10-3, and that would have put me in line for trying to win best of. But you live and you learn. I had a great time playing Lucian. It was really, really fun, and it's a very rewarding deck once you get into it. I won't go into this too much, because if you really want to play a top-level Lucian deck that put the results in, I recommend you go check out Demon X's guide, who put something out there, and also he did some content on Turn 'em Sideways where he did an interview and kind of went through his strategy. But the kind of tech that I was looking at playing was things like Gem Jammers, so we could get the ganking. We were trying out the Dunebreaker. So this was effectively with the Skyforge. We had the, sorry, I say Skyforge, it's actually Skyfall of Venerian. We were able to run in, get the draws immediately, and sort of idea behind it being it's 7 might, it was pretty good into things like singularities and stuff like that. It was quite hard to remove. And I was also playing Confront in the main, so this allowed me to try and cheat some more things in immediately. So things like my Gem Jammers and Rune Runners could act immediately. Also in the sideboard, we had Yone, because I believe this was going to be very good into Aurelia. It turned out it was very, very good into a lot of the rogue decks, because simply they were not able to prevent Yone just running over their backline. I also went very heavy on the Bone Shivers to sort of ramp up my resources, and things like Relentless Pursuit, where you could play Lucian turn 1, and then play Bone Shiver, Relentless Pursuit, and then go up to 6 runes, and then when you untap on your next turn, you'd be on 8 runes. So yeah, it was a lot more teched versus what I probably should have been playing was the Rune Runner. My logic behind not playing the Rune Runner was that when I played the play-in, so the regional qualifier play-in, which is on the Friday, I found that I wasn't able to protect that Rune Runner very well, and it just kept getting run over by things such as Fighting Tail Watcher. Kai'Sa was literally the bane of my existence. I played 5 of them, and I consider that to be the worst matchup for this deck. But it isn't unbeatable when you build around it. So I actually ended up taking the Rune Runners out, and I regret that because Rune Runner, it's much better when you do play the maximum numbers of punch first, and you play around the fact that you're going to be using your Relentless Pursuit to send in a ready Rune Runner to double conquer with the Trinity Force Skyfall combo, and then really rack up those points. Ultimately, the tech in that worked very, very well because all of my rogue matchups I won. It was just, I really struggled with Kai'Sa, and then I was about 50-50 against Draven, and I think I could have done better into Draven if my deck was more focused. I am going to be playing in Atlanta, so I will be making improvements. I will be sticking to Lucian in this case, as I still think it's a very good deck. Post bans as well, it's very, very interesting. The only thing I'm concerned about is Aurelia can be a very, very tough matchup because you can't get on top of the Stellacorn Herder, and they can run you over with things like Charm. They've got the scoring cheating with their Draven. They play a million counter spells, so it's very hard to resolve Relentless Pursuit. And my logic was Yone should be able to get us in there, but because if you try and challenge, there's so many things that can go wrong. You can lose to Discipline, you can lose to Blade Dance, it's just, or they could just counterspell it with all of their counters. So this isn't a reliable way to actually kill the Stellacorn Herders. The Aurelia is less of a problem. It's generally more of a, oh yeah, you've got the Stellacorn Herder and you're drawing way more cards than I can, because this deck doesn't draw very many cards. I do have to change one of my battlefields. Obelisk of Power is obviously now banned. I do love these giant tags on Piltover Archive, because in this deck you kind of end up with, you see about 12 cards throughout the entire game, unless you get a little bit lucky with some of your Kai'Sa triggers, or if you're playing on, say, Sunken Temple. Your top 12 cards is going to be, I need to win the game with these. And sometimes you're going to find that Trinity Force Skyfall combo, which allows you to multi-score. Other times you're not going to, and you're going to have to play a little bit more of a fair game where you're just playing, cool, I've got these guys that dart in and out with really, really high attack. But overall, to talk a bit about the Vegas City event itself, there was lots of positives. It was incredible to actually see it all run out. It's been a long time since I've actually gone to a card game event to play, and I really enjoyed it. I met up with a bunch of guys that I met on Discord, and we've been playing online for a long time, people I've casted with, people that we played in tournaments, and we just basically said, hey, let's get Airbnb and see how we get on. And it went really, really well. I think there was about 6 of us. We had a really big house. We got to do playtesting until silly hours in the morning, and it was all kind of that stuff that you get to enjoy, which is a very big difference from when you're doing it from the other side, where you're traveling to the events for work and you've got to write up a bunch of reports and stuff like that. And it was a great experience, and overall I enjoyed it. There were certainly some things I would like to see improved with the regional qualifier events. The big thing, I guess, would be to start off with the side events. So effectively what people were doing was they were forming these pods of 8+ players to go in and play into these constructed tournaments, and then they would all effectively concede to funnel all of the tickets to one player, and then they would go sign up again, and they would just keep doing that until they had enough tickets to buy the plated cards, which is limited to 1 per player per weekend, and the secondary market value of those are extraordinarily high. So what ended up happening was, in Vegas they were putting certain players on cooldowns, so this meant that you couldn't actually keep signing up, but it was kind of just up to the judge's discretion on if a player was on cooldown or something like that. So those things could definitely be sorted out, because you can definitely see in the digital side when you're signing people up, if people keep joining together, you could effectively have people all sign up, put them in a queue, and then ping them on the app where it says, hey, this is your pod, go over and play. So you can keep making sure that people get randomized on those knockouts. The play-in regional part was also really, really fun. The problem is you get absolutely nothing from it if you don't go 4-2. I went 3-3, and I lost the last game by literally the next card on my deck was the Trinity Force, and that would have allowed me to win the game. In that case, I was 1 point short playing against an Aurelia player. The guy I played against was great, and like it was amazing for him, because that one game was equivalent to about $1,000, about $960, because people sell their event tickets. That's something else I'll talk about in a second at the event, because you're not supposed to do that, but people were. So I ended up going 3-3 and didn't get anything for the play-in, which kind of felt like I gave up my whole Friday. It did give me very valuable playtesting experience with the deck, so I was able to make some adjustments, which really paid off when I played day 1 of the main event. I think the tickets, to prevent them being transferable to other players, and this would actually kind of in some ways, it would help the playing experience for people who want to play. It would definitely take away from people who go to these events to try and get as much value out as possible, would be to associate the public event tickets to be digital attached to your Riot ID. So you wouldn't be able to effectively sell the tickets or basically stock them up and immediately go over and get the plated cards, because the really big plated cards like Ari and that, they were gone before the play-in had even finished. And so many of the plated cards were just gone because of the pod farming that was already going on. So it kind of felt a little bit like, okay, cool, I've give up my whole day to play in this event. And if you go 6-0, you get a buy, which is great. But there's a lot of players that already had buys from the skirmishes, and you had to go 6-0 specifically to get that. But going 3-3 is the worst possible case, because if you go, say, 2-3, you can drop and you still have time to do something else on the Friday. But it was a long time to play into that and effectively get nothing for it. It's also quite expensive as a public event if you're going to do it. It's very low value to play in that event if you are going to get the highest EV out of the event. Then the main event, I think the only thing that I would really like to see Riot do would be to introduce day 2 promos for anybody who makes it through to day 2, because it is a huge accomplishment to go 6-2. It's very hard. Everybody's obviously out there trying to do their best. Dropping is largely discouraged if you're playing on any of the non-meta legends, because your chance of getting the best of is quite high, especially if you're on something that historically has put up very bad results like Lee Sin, where literally make it to day 2 and you probably get the Lee Sin metal best of. I would like to see like a promo. It would have been really cool to have like a day 2 stamped stack deck, or something from the second set, like a day 2 stacked Cool Shot. Maybe less so now that Cool Shot is been banned, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But this would add a lot of value to players that actually do play through to day 2 and then get knocked out. Because if you play on throughout the whole thing to try and win the best of, you lose out on the opportunity to play in some of the public events, and you can walk away completely empty-handed if you stay in. So you end up in a situation where you kind of look around you and people are like, oh, am I still in it with a best of, or do I need to just drop right now? Which is, dropping kind of helps the tournament run forward, but it is always a bit of a rough spot where you're strategically trying to decide, do I stick on even though I've not got a chance of making top cut or even top 64, because I'm still technically in the running for one of these best of prizings. Other things from the event that I would have liked to have saw done a little bit differently, the way that the chairs and tables were laid out, there was effectively, they were snaked. So you had all the table numbers and you walk down and up rows. And at the end of each row, you had basically a little table tent that said, this is tables X to Y, and then you can go on to the next one. And the problem is, because they snaked, it meant that all of the foot traffic was all over the place trying to find their seating. And then you walked to the end of one hall, and it basically divided it in two. So if you imagine at the front of the hall, you had all of the low number tables, and the higher number tables, you had to go all the way to the back corner again and come around, and it was snaking. So it was a little bit initially difficult to find seating. Having the table numbers at both ends of the table would have been really helpful. It would have helped players find their seats a lot faster, and not snaking would have also helped, as it meant you wouldn't have to keep walking down and back up when you're trying to find your seat. But other than that, the end of match procedures, a lot of rounds ran over time, and a big part of this was because the big decks in the format were playing lots of cards like Stack Deck, Cool Shot, and this resulted in many people going to time, and some of the rounds ending about 40 or 50 minutes over. Riftbound is a very complicated game, but too many games were going to time, and I think that's something that will be greatly improved following the ban list. But overall, Vegas was great. I'm really looking forward to Atlanta, and hopefully meeting some more of you there. You'll spot me playing on my Robot Raiders mat, so do come up and say hello if you watch the content and you enjoy it. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the bans. This is really huge news. Riot has announced the first card bans, and effectively you can tell that there was a particular color that they had a problem with that got the brunt of them. So we're looking at Cold Shot, Draven Vanquisher, Fight or Flight, Scrap Heap. Those are cards that would go in the main deck that have been banned, and then 3 battlefields. I'm very happy with the battlefields, as I think this is probably the right way to tackle some of the more problematic strategies. For example, Reaver's Row was a very toxic battlefield, and basically forcing you to build your deck in a certain way where you needed a certain amount of removal that could either hit the magic numbers, which is going to be essentially 4+, or you needed stuff to be able to hit the base, and not every color has access to that. So it made a lot of decks unviable, especially when you were running into situations where they moved their treasure hunter in, and then you have no way of dealing with that treasure hunter without exhausting some kind of removal spell, which means your opponent's gained a gold and you've spent more energy killing their treasure hunter than they spent playing it, and they've already got value from it. And if you just try and walk in to attack it, they can use the Reaver's Row to retreat, make more gold, and then they're getting ahead in the resource race. Reaver's Row was just a really awful battlefield. And in fact, in some of the earlier tournaments I was casting, I was convinced this would be the first battlefield that got banned, and we ended up getting 3 of them. The next one that was a surprise, but also very welcome, is the Obelisk of Power. This was causing a lot of problems. Effectively, Riftbound has a going second problem, and that's because you want to play free cost units in your deck for the games where you're going second, but the free cost units get massively outclassed by anything that costs 4. And during game 1, you do not know if you're going first or second because it comes down to the dice roll. If you have too many free costs in your deck, your second turn, you're playing free when your opponent's playing their 4, you're falling behind in that situation. Or you're playing your 2-drop and you're burning 1 energy and your opponent's getting quite ahead on the resource race. Obelisk of Power let you skip this, as we were starting to see lots of legends that had the 4 energy costs that you could just effectively play Obelisk for when your opponent's most likely to put you on second, and then go ahead and just play your chosen champion, and you never had to miss that spot in your curve, and it made your opponent's free cost units not so great, unless they're Lucian, because Lucian is just an incredible card. So Obelisk, very happy to see gone. I think in order to fix the go first, go second problem, we ideally need more chosen champions that come in at the free range. I appreciate the whole point of getting rid of Obelisk was so that your turn 2 wasn't as consistent. But we either need more viable 1-cost cards so that when we do go second, we can go 2-drop 1-cost, or we need to have chosen champions that are on free, or things like Sea Monkey, I think are incredible because you simply get to play it as either a 2-drop or a 3-drop is independent of the dice roll. And this is actually one of the advantages to Lee Sin, is it doesn't really matter if you're going first or second, you already know that you can just play your 2-drop, put a buff on it, and you've got something that will contest their 2-drop, which means that the randomization at the start of the match doesn't affect you as much. Obelisk was just taking that all out of there, and when we look at the next set, there's a lot of 4-cost champions that all have Deflect that Obelisk was going to be supporting. So very happy to see Obelisk go. I think they could have left it, but I do understand for the long-term health of the game. This one, it's a good one to get rid of. Next up, we have the Dreaming Tree. Now, Dreaming Tree was just always problematic. It made a bunch of cards that were never intended to give you value beyond just immediately playing them, just give you infinite value. You'd be able to play things like On Guard and not lose card advantage, when the disadvantage is when you play On Guard and there's a chance that you get blown out. That's kind of like one of the weaknesses to having a reaction card that gives you plus might. Dreaming Tree was offsetting all of that, and if you could trigger it during your opponent's turn and during your turn, it was getting a little bit silly. And it was always when there was a draw battlefield, a lot of the legends that were viable were how well can they play on Dreaming Tree or how well can they play on Reaver's Row. So it's another good one to get rid of. And I do appreciate there's going to be a lot of things like Aurelia's, Master Yi's, and a lot of the green decks are going to be quite sad to see Dreaming Tree go, but it was very hard to convince people to take a look at the battlefields for set 3 when you had options like this existing. So they're all cards that are powerful, but they don't particularly break decks when you ban them. So I very much agree with these and think they are great. Next up, we have the actual main deck cards. So Cold Shot, Draven Vanquisher, Fight or Flight, and Scrap Heap. Cold Shot and Scrap Heap, absolutely the bare minimum of what needed to go. The format was very artificial because you effectively had every purple deck was effectively playing these cards. And if you were going to try and win the tournament, Draven was just massively overtuned. The legend ability and also being able to get tons of value out of things like Fight or Flight or all of these things that kind of push combat off. The drawback to playing those cards should be that you are losing card advantage and not really answering your opponent's threats. You're pressuring their tempo. But Draven was then making it so that pushing your opponent off tempo wasn't costing them cards. This has kind of resulted in very toxic gameplays. And then when we started getting into the miracle engines, so Cold Shot, Scrap Heap being able to fly through the deck, play Razas, play Battering Rams. Basically every purple deck ended up being in a situation where if you were not playing this kind of strategy, why were you playing Chaos? Why were you playing purple? It's like very hard to get as much value out as you were getting from these cards. And pushing round timers up as well. Scrap Heap drawing multiple cards. It's just cool. I'll just play my Ezreal, discard Scrap Heap, draw 3 cards. Then I can Cold Shot, and then I get to draw another 2 cards. My consistency was through the roof, and it was just taking up so much time. Compared to what the other colors are able to do, Miracle decks were very capable of just being basically out of resources, ripping 1 Cold Shot, and then just absolutely exploding. So getting rid of these cards, very, very good. It means that other decks don't have to have the same kind of value engines in order to be competitive. Now, don't get me wrong, purple is still an incredible color. I just think the unfair part about the consistency that it was getting, in addition to all of the movement, the counter spells, and a lot of the disruption, like things like Vex, that's all gone. So happy to see that being toned down. Fight or Flight, I'm happy with. I think I wasn't expecting Fight or Flight to go. I know quite a few people were. This card really is problematic, especially going forward when you look at the new legends. Things like Vi, for example, was just going to really struggle, especially with like Reaver's Row and Fight or Flight. It was just, you can't play this deck seriously because Chaos is just going to make sure that you never get any legend value. And it was hard to convince people to play anything other than Fight or Flight, right? Because it's a 2 energy card that denies a combat, and your legend gains a bunch of different advantages from that. And you could also hide it. So even if you would want to tap out to develop, you could also then back up one of your battlefields with Fight or Flight. And this probably needed to not have hidden in order for it to be considered staying around. And even then, it would still be quite an annoying card to deal with. So this being removed also takes away the option of many decks to just try and go for a hard hold on one side, Fight or Flight their own unit back, and then just move into the other battlefield. It takes away that kind of flexibility that a lot of these Chaos decks was getting access to in the late game, where they could go for a big hold and then know that they could turn the tables on the other side. And they could still play things like Ride the Wind and stuff like that, but it's a lot more expensive to play Ride the Wind in that situation. Then Draven Vanquisher, which was just largely the best 2-drop in the entire game. It gave a ton of value. You got to take it as a chosen champion, so the consistency for Draven to just play this on its turn 2 every time it played Obelisk, and it would just be a massive bully. It was massively overstatted, sacking a rune to just get the +2, then also win the combat, get your legend trigger. You basically, a lot of the game plans came down to killing Draven, and there wasn't really an efficient way to kill him without spending power, which your opponent didn't even invest, and then your opponent could potentially trick out of it by playing Spinning Axe and going up to 7, which meant things like Piercing Light or Falling Star would end up falling short of being able to kill this. So your opponent's invested power into not killing the unit that's giving you a ridiculous amount of might to contest. So happy to see Vanquisher gone as well. And I think overall, these will make Atlanta and Lille a more interesting format, although I think Aurelia is probably very, very strong now, and so is Prison. Decks where all the removal is going to be very, very heavy, especially since Aurelia rises, and then the removal decks that can play Call the Weak or other things that can get around the deflect on Aurelia, they're going to be very, very popular. So these are all very, very welcome, although for the online communities, most of us now are going on to Unleashed format, but we're happy to see these bans because realistically, if people were playing Pike, they were just going to be playing the Cold Shot, Fight or Flight, Scrap Heap engine. That was even more prevalent in Kha'Zix, where you were using lots of movement effects to take advantage of your legend ability. So then you could be going, oh yeah, I can keep moving my Treasure Hunter or my Traveling Merchant and with my Scrap Heaps and stuff. So all of these very, very welcome. And I'm looking forward to see how much of an impact this has on the remaining Spirit Forge tournaments. And more importantly, it gives a lot of breathing room to Unleashed. So to get to the last section of this video, I'm going to be talking about where we're going in the future. So I'm going to be getting back to doing some deck guides for Unleashed. I'm really looking forward to jumping into some stuff. I've been really enjoying playing Vi at the moment, and these bans have just made it very much more interesting, because I actually initially had Vi listed very, very low, and now I'm like, actually, Vi's pretty good. I'm quite cool with this, and it plays very differently from something like Rek'Sai or Darius. So I'll be doing a deck guide for that in the near future. I'm also really interested in Poppy. Poppy's great, and I really like the XP mechanics. I'll definitely be doing a guide on that as well. And there'll be a few other legends and stuff that we jump into. Yeah, for now, I'm going to be doing taking it a little bit easier on some of the longer form content and sort of making it so it's like a lot easier to edit so that I can get back to being more consistent with this stuff. But I'm really looking forward to casting more tournaments. If you do want to play online, there are so many tournaments out there. I'll link Friday Fight Nights, and I'll also link the tournaments that are organized by Silent Knight, who's another big YouTuber on here. And you can get involved. We just play on TCG Arena. It's completely free, and pretty much everything's moving on to Unleashed. So if you want to get that experience before Unleashed drops, you are now able to do so. But that's going to wrap it up from here. Again, sorry for the big blackout and not communicating with you guys. It's been a bit of a wild ride, and we're going to ease back into it. But I greatly appreciate any of you. And if you want to stick along and see some more of the content we got coming out, please do hit that subscribe button so you'll be the first to know when we're coming back to it. But for now, I'm going to sign it off here. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.